Next speaker is Professor Martin Parry from Imperial College London, who's been involved in 3 of the IPCC reports and will talk about adaptation.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to IIASA scholars for what I thought was a great introduction. This is a daunting.
Microphone.
This is a daunting. Have you got me now? A daunting challenge, eliminating poverty and inequity, and it's essentially been a world beyond reach. I'm reversing the title of the conference, World Within, and to make it a world within is going to, as George Jager said, we're going to require a transformation. I want to add another compelling reason, though, for making this a world within reach, that this is my one message, essentially, that I don't believe, and I think most of the community I work with on impacts and adaptation to climate change believe that we can adapt to climate change without making this transformation, without transforming to a world with fewer people and less marginalized people. Everything we know about impacts of climate change are that they will fall upon the weak, the elderly, the poor, the marginalized, the young. And those are precisely words that are in the IPCC policymakers' summary from 2007. And that those effects will ripple out from those marginalized to affect us all. Also, the IPCC said, well, this is daunting, but it also gives us a potential solution, that if we make this transformation, we can avoid a lot of these damages. If we don't make this transformation, we are going to face these challenges. So to bring the poor and the marginalized within reach is, I would say, a necessary condition for adaptation to climate change. Well, what's the scale of this challenge? It looks like at our current rather meager efforts, we're on target for a world that's perhaps 4 degrees warmer than present. It's certainly wise to prepare to adapt for 4 degrees. It may be we'll need to confront 6 degrees. And we'll need to cut emissions by something like 80% to have a 4-in-1 chance of avoiding 2 degrees, which is a target we've set. We have at least set ourselves a target. We haven't done much towards achieving it yet. 3 sets of numbers I want to use to illustrate what we can do in this transformation. If we don't transform and essentially progress as we are now with emissions and in a business as usual world, as it were, we face something like 100 to 200 million more hungry people in a climate-changed world rather than a world without climate change, about 3 million more people at risk of coastal flooding, both of those about a 20% increase above the current hazard level, and about 2 billion more people short of water, essentially a doubling. So that's where we're heading for, right? But I said there's a way out of this if we can transform. A way out of the climate change sort of denouement, which is this. Because those impacts largely fall on the poor, the marginalized, especially in Africa, as the presentations have shown, and South Asia, if we were to make this transformation to a more wealthy and less marginalized world, we would call that under the SRES futures a B2 world for the aficionados amongst you. Then we get a whopping reduction in these potential impacts. And the work done at the IIASA shows this. In Buzz Holling's time, we started a collaboration between the Climate Impacts Project and the Food and Agriculture Project, which showed that we would roughly halve the amount of hungry people that would be added by climate change above that expected in a non-climate change world. We would halve the numbers of additional people short of water. We will probably eliminate any increase in numbers at risk of coastal flooding. Do you see what I'm pointing to here? This transformation gives us a way out of an additional compelling issue, how to adapt to climate change. And it does it because this wealthy and non-marginal world has the sort of safety nets of the kinds that Shonali and Joanne were talking about. And I don't need to go into those now. Now, of course, there are limits to this, and there are biophysical or ecosystems that that transformation would be extremely difficult for. It's unlikely we'll be able to refrigerate the seas around the Great Barrier Reef, although Australian scientists certainly have the capabilities. But most, they'd like to, but most of them would say that is something we probably cannot do much about. We can de-stress the stresses on the barrier reef, and that will make a difference. Now, we've made a start. We've put aside 50 billion as a target by 2030s, $50 billion a year to spend on adaptation. We've got 10 or 20 million so far, right? Moving up to perhaps 100, but 50 billion. That is what we have done so far to make this transformation. It's essentially a doubling of current overseas aid. That we've got to make that pay to enable that transformation to be made. So in conclusion, 10 years ago, adaptation was a dirty word because we were told that we could mitigate our way out of this issue. We now know we cannot mitigate our way out of this issue. We're going to have to both mitigate so we don't exceed the limits to adaptation, and we're going to need to adapt. So the proposition I want to leave with you is this. Building adaptive capacity is necessary to confront damages from climate change, but reducing poverty and increasing equity is absolutely key to building adaptive capacity. We need both. And I don't think, and nor do I think most of the community I work with, that we can confront climate change with the numbers of poor and the numbers of marginalized that we live with today. And if I can look at Jill once more to try to make the point, which came up yesterday and I think will come up today, we would always like to know more, but we know enough to act now.